My wife's sister offered to babysit my kids for our anniversary. Seemed sweet as she'd never offered before. As we were leaving, I found her overnight bag in the hallway. I opened it and screamed, "Get the kids. Call 911." I saw what was inside, and my blood went cold. She wasn't here to babysit. 20 minutes later, police had surrounded our house. The washing machine had just finished its final spin when my phone rang. I was standing in our cramped laundry room, sorting through a mountain of tiny socks and superhero t-shirts that somehow always ended up inside out. Tuesday nights were my laundry nights. Had been for the past 3 years since Riley started picking up those extra shifts at the hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it was our routine, and honestly, I'd grown to appreciate the quiet ritual of folding and organizing while the house settled into evening calm. Mia was upstairs working on her math homework, probably struggling with those long division problems that made her scrunch up her nose in concentration. The twins, Jonah and Ezra, were finally quiet after their usual post-dinner chaos, building block towers just to knock them down, chasing each other around the coffee table until Riley threatened to take away their bedtime story. 5-year-olds, man. They're like tiny hurricanes with chocolate milk mustaches. When I saw Clarice's name pop up on my phone screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. Riley's sister wasn't exactly what you'd call a regular caller. Hell, she wasn't even an irregular caller. The last time we'd heard from her was Christmas, and that was only because Riley had called her 3 times before she finally picked up. Even then, the conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, just long enough for Clarice to say the kids sounded busy in the background and that she had to run. But something made me swipe to answer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that I was elbow deep in tiny underwear and needed any distraction I could get. "Hey, Clarice," I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while I shook out one of Ezra's dinosaur shirts. "What's up, Marcus?" Her voice was brighter than usual, almost musical. "I hope I'm not calling too late. I know you guys are probably doing the whole bedtime routine thing." I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 7:30. Not late, but definitely past the time when Clarice usually acknowledged our existence. "Nah, you're fine. Riley's upstairs with the boys, and Mia's doing homework." "What's going on?" There was this pause, like she was gathering her thoughts, or maybe working up the courage to say whatever she'd called to say. In the background, I could hear what sounded like a TV, some kind of cooking show with that overly enthusiastic host who always sounds like he's had too much coffee. "Well," she said, and I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. "I've been thinking lately about how hard you and Riley work. Between your job at the plant and her nursing shifts, plus chasing around 3 kids. God, I don't know how you do it." I stopped folding. Clarice had never once commented on our work schedules, let alone expressed any kind of sympathy for how busy we were. She lived about 20 minutes away in that fancy apartment complex near the mall, the kind with the granite countertops and the pool that nobody ever used. We'd been there exactly once, for a housewarming party that lasted about as long as it took her to show us around and offer us wine we couldn't pronounce. "Yeah, it keeps us busy," I said carefully. "But we manage." "I know you do, and that's exactly why I'm calling." Her voice got even more animated, like she was about to announce she'd won the lottery or something. "Your anniversary is coming up next week, right? October 15th. Now I was really confused. Clarice remembering our anniversary was like expecting our goldfish to do trigonometry. Riley had to remind her own mother about our anniversary every year, and they talked twice a week. "Yeah, that's right," I said. 10 years. Hard to believe. 10 years. "Marcus, that's incredible. And you know what? I was thinking, and don't say no right away, okay? But I was thinking maybe I could babysit for you guys that night. You know, so you could actually go out and celebrate properly." I dropped Jonah's pajama pants. Just straight up let them fall to the laundry room floor while I stood there trying to process what I'd just heard. Clarice? Volunteering to babysit? The same Clarice who'd shown up to Mia's birthday party 2 hours late and spent the entire time checking her phone? The same Clarice who'd never changed a diaper, never wiped a nose, never even asked how the kids were doing in school? "You want to babysit?" I repeated, making sure I'd heard her right. I know. I haven't been the most involved aunt, but I've been feeling really bad about that lately. These kids are growing up so fast, and I'm missing all of it. Mia's what, 9 now? And the twins are starting kindergarten this year. 5. I corrected automatically. They won't start kindergarten until next year. Right, 5. See, this is exactly what I mean. I should know these things. I want to know these things. She sighed, and for a moment she actually sounded genuine. Look, Marcus, I know I haven't been the best sister to Riley or the best aunt to your kids, but I'm trying to change that. And what better way to start than by giving you two a night to yourselves? I found myself nodding even though she couldn't see me. It made sense in a weird way. People changed, right? Maybe Clarice was finally ready to step up and be part of the family. God knows Riley had been hoping for that for years. She'd always made excuses for her sister. Clarice was busy with work. Clarice was dealing with her own stuff. Clarice just wasn't good with kids. But deep down, I knew it hurt Riley that her only sister barely acknowledged her children existed. That's really nice of you to offer, I said. But are you sure? 3 kids can be a handful, especially if you're not used to. Marcus. Her voice was firm now, almost businesslike. I've been doing my research. I've been reading parenting blogs, watching YouTube videos about bedtime routines. I even bought one of those baby-proofing books. I know I'm not going to magically become super aunt overnight, but I can handle one evening. Besides, how hard can it be? Famous last words, I thought, but I kept that to myself. Instead, I found myself saying, okay, yeah, that would be great, actually. Riley and I haven't had a real date night in. Well, probably since before the twins were born. Perfect. Clarice practically squealed. I'm so excited. This is going to be great, Marcus. You'll see. I'm going to be the best babysitter those kids have ever had. After we hung up, I stood there in the laundry room for a long moment, holding Ezra's tiny shirt and trying to figure out why something felt off about the whole conversation. Maybe it was just because change always felt weird at first. Maybe it was because I'd gotten so used to Clarice being distant that her sudden enthusiasm seemed too good to be true. Or maybe it was because, in all her excitement about babysitting, she'd never once asked about the kids themselves. Never asked how they were doing, what they liked to do, what their bedtime routines actually were. She'd talked about research and YouTube videos, but she hadn't asked about Mia's latest obsession with astronomy or Jonah's fear of the dark or the way Ezra still insisted on sleeping with that ratty stuffed elephant he'd had since he was a baby. But I pushed those thoughts aside as I climbed the stairs to tell Riley the news. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe Clarice was genuinely trying to be better, and I should give her the benefit of the doubt. Besides, what was the worst that could happen? Saturday couldn't come fast enough. All week, I'd been looking forward to this night like a kid counting down to Christmas morning. I'd made reservations at Romano's, that little steakhouse downtown where Riley and I had our first real date 10 years ago. Back then, I was so nervous I'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and spent half the night worried I'd embarrass myself trying to cut my steak properly. Now here we were, a decade later, 3 kids deep into this crazy adventure called marriage, and I was just as excited to take my wife out as I'd been when we were young and stupid and thought we had all the time in the world. Riley had been buzzing around the house all afternoon, and I could tell she was just as pumped as I was. She'd gotten her hair done at that salon she only went to for special occasions, the one where they actually knew how to handle her thick, curly hair instead of just giving up halfway through like most places did. When she came downstairs in that emerald green dress, the one that made her eyes look like something out of a jewelry commercial, I swear my heart skipped a beat just like it did when we were dating. Damn, I said, straightening my tie and trying not to sound like a complete idiot. You look incredible. She did this little spin, laughing when the dress flared out around her knees. Think it's too much? I feel like I haven't dressed up in forever. I kept looking in the mirror thinking, do I even remember how to do this? Are you kidding me? You look perfect. I pulled her close, breathing in that perfume she only wore for special occasions, something floral and expensive that I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. I'm going to be the luckiest guy in that restaurant tonight. The kids had been surprisingly good all day, which should have been my first clue that the universe was setting us up for something. Mia had actually cleaned her room without being asked, and the twins had played together for a solid hour without a single fight breaking out. Even when I told them Aunt Clarice was coming to babysit, they just nodded and went back to their Legos like it was the most normal thing in the world. At exactly 5:55, the doorbell rang. I remember checking my watch and being surprised. Clarice was never early for anything. Hell, Clarice was barely on time for anything. But there she was, standing on our front porch with this huge smile plastered across her face, looking like she'd just won the lottery or something. "Hey there," she called out as I opened the door. "Ready for your big night out?" She was carrying this massive black duffel bag, the kind you'd take on a weekend camping trip, or maybe to the gym if you were one of those people who actually used gym memberships. It looked heavy, and she was gripping the handle like her life depended on it. "Clarice, hey, you're early." I stepped aside to let her in, trying not to stare at the bag. "That's a lot of stuff for one night of babysitting." She laughed, but it sounded forced, like she was trying too hard to seem casual. "Oh, you know me. I like to be prepared. I brought some activities for the kids, maybe some snacks, change of clothes in case something gets spilled. Better safe than sorry, right?" From the kitchen, I could hear Riley putting together the emergency contact list. Phone numbers for poison control, our pediatrician, both sets of grandparents, the neighbors. She'd been working on that thing all afternoon, even though I kept telling her we were only going to be gone for 3 hours max. "Aunt Clarice." Mia came running down the stairs, followed by the twins who were still in their matching dinosaur pajamas even though it wasn't even bedtime yet. Clarice dropped her bag by the front door and opened her arms wide, scooping all 3 kids into this group hug that looked like something out of a greeting card commercial. "There are my favorite little monsters," she said, and for a moment, she actually sounded genuine. "I brought you guys some dinner. McDonald's Happy Meals are in the kitchen." The twins cheered and ran off toward the kitchen, but Mia hung back, studying Clarice with that serious expression she got when she was trying to figure something out. My daughter was too smart for her own good sometimes. Always asking questions, always noticing things that adults thought they were hiding. "Mom said you've never babysat us before," Mia said, tilting her head to one side. "How come you want it now?" Clarice's smile flickered for just a second, so quick I almost missed it. Then it was back, bright and cheerful as ever. "Well, honey, sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. And I figured out that I've been missing out on getting to know you and your brothers better. Tonight's going to be our chance to fix that." Riley appeared from the kitchen, holding a piece of paper covered in her neat handwriting. "Okay, here's everything you need to know," she said, handing it to Clarice. "Bedtimes, emergency numbers, what they can and can't eat. Mia's allowed to stay up until 9 on weekends, but the twins need to be in bed by 8. Jonah sometimes has nightmares, so if he wakes up crying, just turn on his night light and sit with him for a few minutes. Ezra likes his elephant, and—" "Riley." Clarice held up her hand, still smiling that weird, too bright smile. "Honey, I've got this. I've been reading parenting blogs all week. I probably know more about bedtime routines than you think." I had to bite back a laugh at that one. Clarice had been reading parenting blogs? The same Clarice who'd once asked if babies could eat regular food at 6 months old? But hey, maybe she really was trying to step up her game. "Besides," she continued, "how hard can it be? They're good kids, right? We'll watch some movies, maybe play some games, and before you know it, they'll be fast asleep and you two will be home." Riley looked like she wanted to say more, but I put my hand on her shoulder. "Come on, babe. We're already running late, and you know how Romano's gets on Saturday nights." She nodded, but I could see the worry lines creasing her forehead. "You have our cell numbers, right? And you'll call if anything happens?" "Anything at all." "Of course," Clarice said, waving the emergency list in the air. "But nothing's going to happen. We're going to have a great time, aren't we, kids?" From the kitchen came the sound of the twins arguing over who got which toy in their Happy Meal, followed by Mia's voice trying to mediate like the little mother hen she was. Normal kid chaos. The kind of chaos that used to stress me out, but now just sounded like home. "Okay," Riley said, taking a deep breath. "Okay, we can do this. It's just a few hours." I grabbed our coats from the closet, already imagining the look on Riley's face when she tasted Romano's famous chocolate lava cake. We'd been talking about going back there for months, but between work schedules and kid activities and just general life craziness, we'd never managed to make it happen. As we headed toward the door, I glanced back at Clarice, who was standing in the hallway watching us with that same intense smile. Something about it made my stomach twist, but I pushed the feeling down. She was family. She was trying. And Riley and I deserved this night out. "Thanks again for doing this," I called over my shoulder. "Really, it means a lot." "Don't mention it," she called back. "You two have fun, and don't worry about a thing." We were almost out the door when I realized I'd forgotten my wallet. Classic me. Get all dressed up, get Riley looking like $1,000,000, and then forget the one thing that would actually let us pay for dinner. Riley was already in the car, fixing her lipstick in the rearview mirror, when I held up a finger and mouthed 1 second through the windshield. I jogged back inside, calling out to Clarice, just grabbing my wallet, be right back. The house felt different somehow, quieter than usual, even though I could hear the kids chattering in the kitchen over their happy meals. Maybe it was just because we were actually leaving them with someone who wasn't my mom or Riley's parents. Maybe it was because this whole situation still felt surreal. My wallet was sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd left it after paying the pizza guy yesterday. As I grabbed it, I could see Clarice through the doorway, crouched down next to the twins, listening to some elaborate story Ezra was telling about his dinosaur toy. She was nodding and smiling, making all the right responses, but something about her body language seemed off. Too stiff, too rehearsed, like she was performing the role of good aunt rather than just being herself. But hell, maybe that's just how she was with kids. Some people needed time to warm up, right? And at least she was trying. I was heading back toward the front door when I saw it. That black duffel bag she'd brought in, sitting right there in the hallway. She'd set it down when the kids tackled her with hugs, and now it was just sitting there, partially hidden behind the coat rack, but still visible if you knew where to look. And here's the thing that bothered me. It wasn't zipped all the way. There was maybe a 2-inch gap where the zipper hadn't quite closed, like she'd been in a hurry or the bag was too full to zip properly. I could see a flash of something white inside, maybe a shirt or a towel or something. I should have kept walking. I should have grabbed my keys, kissed Riley goodbye, and spent the next 3 hours enjoying the first real date we'd had in months. But that nagging feeling in my gut, the one that had been bothering me since Clarice's phone call, was getting stronger by the minute. I glanced toward the kitchen. Clarice was still engaged with the kids, asking Mia about school or something. They couldn't see me from where they were sitting. Riley was outside in the car, probably wondering what was taking me so long. Just a quick look, I told myself, just to put my mind at ease. I bent down and carefully pulled the zipper open another few inches. What I saw inside made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Duct tape. A whole roll of it, the heavy-duty kind you'd use for moving boxes or fixing things that needed to stay fixed. Next to it, a coil of yellow rope, not the cheap stuff you'd get at a dollar store, but real rope, the kind that could hold weight. My hands started shaking as I opened the bag wider. Bottles. 3 of them, filled with what looked like children's cough syrup, except the labels had been peeled off, so I couldn't tell what they really contained. And next to those, 2 prescription bottles with the labels completely scratched off, filled with pills I didn't recognize. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found underneath all of that. 3 small lunchboxes, the kind you'd pack for a school field trip. Each one had a piece of masking tape stuck to the front with a name written in Clarice's neat handwriting. Mia. Jonah. Ezra. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened Mia's lunchbox with trembling fingers. Inside was a complete change of clothes. Underwear, socks, a t-shirt, and jeans that looked like they'd fit her perfectly. A small hairbrush. A travel-sized bottle of the same shampoo she used at home. The same thing was in Jonah's box. And Ezra's. 3 complete sets of clothes, each one perfectly sized for my children. Like someone had been watching them, studying them, planning for this exact moment. At the very bottom of the bag, I found a manila envelope. Inside were printed MapQuest directions to somewhere in Arizona, a lease agreement for a rental property under a name I didn't recognize, and 3 sets of fake identification documents with my children's photos I'd never seen before, like they'd been taken without our knowledge. The rational part of my brain was trying to come up with some innocent explanation. Maybe Clarice was just being overly prepared. Maybe she brought extra clothes in case something got spilled. Maybe the rope was for some kind of craft project, and the duct tape was for. But I couldn't finish that thought, because there was no innocent explanation for prescription bottles with the labels scraped off. No innocent explanation for fake IDs with my kids' faces on them. No innocent explanation for detailed driving directions to a state we'd never talked about visiting. This wasn't babysitting supplies. This was a kidnapping kit. I could hear Clarice's voice from the kitchen, sweet and cheerful as she asked the kids what their favorite bedtime stories were. She was gathering information, learning their routines. making sure she knew exactly how to handle them when the time came. My vision went red around the edges. Every protective instinct I'd ever had as a father kicked into overdrive, flooding my system with adrenaline. These were my babies, my children, and this woman I'd trusted, this woman Riley had grown up with, had come into our home with a plan to steal them. I shot to my feet so fast I almost knocked over the coat rack. The duffel bag fell open completely, spilling its contents across our hardwood floor. Rope and tape and those horrible little lunch boxes scattered everywhere, and suddenly I was screaming at the top of my lungs. Get the kids. Call 911. From the kitchen came the sound of chairs scraping back, of children's voices raised in confusion and fear. Riley's car door slammed outside. She must have heard me through the windows. But all I could focus on was Clarice's face as she appeared in the kitchen doorway. Gone was the bright, cheerful smile. Gone was the enthusiastic act. What looked back at me was something cold and calculating, like a mask had been ripped away to reveal what was underneath. You don't understand, she said quietly, her voice completely different now. Flat. Empty. I understand plenty, I snarled, backing toward the stairs. Riley, get up here now. The sound of Riley's heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor mixed with the thunder of little feet running down the hallway. I could hear Mia's voice, high and scared, asking, Daddy, what's wrong? Why are you yelling? But I couldn't take my eyes off Clarice, who stood there in our kitchen doorway like some kind of statue, her face completely blank except for her eyes. Her eyes were burning with something that made my skin crawl. Marcus, what the hell is? Riley's voice cut off mid-sentence as she burst through the front door and saw the contents of the duffel bag scattered across our floor. The duct tape had rolled halfway under the coffee table. One of the lunch boxes had popped open, spilling Jonah's carefully folded Spider-Man t-shirt across the rug. I watched my wife's face go through about 6 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then horror, then this kind of primal rage I'd only seen once before, when some drunk asshole at a baseball game had made a crude comment about Mia when she was 7. What is this? Riley's voice was deadly quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a tornado touches down. Clarice, what the fuck is this? Clarice's expression shifted slightly, like she was trying to decide which mask to put back on. For a split second, I saw something that might have been regret flicker across her features, but it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, her voice still eerily calm. You were supposed to be at dinner. I had my phone out, fingers shaking as I tried to dial 911. But my hands were trembling so badly I kept hitting the wrong numbers. 811, 912. Finally, on the 3rd try, I got it right. 911, what's your emergency? My sister-in-law just tried to. I stopped, realizing how insane this was going to sound. She came to babysit our kids, but she's got kidnapping supplies. Rope, drugs, fake IDs. You need to get here now. The dispatcher's voice was professional but urgent. Sir, I need you to stay on the line. Are the children safe? Is the suspect still on the premises? The kids are right here, they're okay. And yeah, she's still here. She's standing right in front of me. Clarice took a step toward the stairs, and something inside me snapped. I dropped the phone and moved to block her path, spreading my arms wide to make myself as big as possible. No way in hell was she getting anywhere near my children. You're not going anywhere, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was shaking apart. You're staying right here until the cops show up. You don't understand, she said again, and this time there was something desperate creeping into her tone. I wasn't going to hurt them. I would never hurt them. They're family. Family. Riley's voice cracked like a whip. You call this family? You come into our house with rope and drugs and fake fucking documents, and you call that family? From upstairs came the sound of the twins crying. They could hear us yelling, could feel the tension crackling through the house like electricity before a storm. Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. Daddy? Mommy? What's happening? Stay upstairs, baby, Riley called out, her voice gentler but still strained. Take your brothers into your room and close the door, okay? Everything's going to be fine. But everything wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. This woman I'd known for 10 years, this woman who'd been at our wedding, who'd held our babies in the hospital, she'd come here tonight with a plan to steal them. to drug them and tie them up and take them God knows where. I rented a place, Clarice said suddenly, like she was confessing to a priest instead of explaining why she tried to kidnap our children. In Arizona. It's nice. There's a yard and good schools nearby. I did my research. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Arizona? What the hell are you talking about? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they could learn who I really am, not just mommy's weird sister who never visits. Her voice was getting higher now, more agitated. You've kept them from me for years. Years, Marcus. I'm their aunt. I have rights. Rights. Riley stepped closer, and I could see her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You have rights? You've barely spoken to them since they were born. You missed Mia's last 3 birthdays. You couldn't even remember how old the twins were last week. Because you never let me be part of their lives. Clarice's mask was completely gone now, replaced by something ugly and raw. Every time I tried to get close, you found excuses. You made me feel like an outsider at every family gathering, like I didn't belong. So you decided to kidnap them? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That was your solution? Drug our kids and steal them in the middle of the night. I wasn't going to hurt them, she insisted, but her voice was getting shakier. Just a little something to keep them calm during the drive. Just until we got settled. And I left a note. I wrote you a note explaining everything. I thought about those prescription bottles with the labels scraped off, and my stomach lurched. A note? You think a fucking note makes this okay? In the distance, I could hear sirens. Getting closer. Riley must have heard them too, because some of the tension went out of her shoulders. Help was coming. The police were coming. Clarice heard them as well. Her head tilted slightly, like a dog picking up a high-pitched sound, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she looked genuinely scared. I just wanted them to know me, she whispered. I just wanted to matter to someone. You mattered to Riley, I said, thinking about all the times my wife had made excuses for her sister, all the times she tried to include Clarice in family events only to have her cancel at the last minute or show up late and leave early. You could have mattered to the kids too, if you'd actually tried to be part of their lives instead of planning to steal them. The sirens were getting louder now. Through the front window, I could see the flash of red and blue lights painting the neighbor's house in shifting colors. Mrs. Patterson from next door was standing on her porch in her bathrobe, probably wondering what the hell was going on. Clarice looked toward the window, then back at me, then at Riley. For a moment, she just stood there, swaying slightly like she might faint. Then she sank down onto our couch, put her head in her hands, and started to cry. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I thought if I could just have some time with them, away from all this, they'd finally see that I could be good for them, that I could be the aunt they deserved. But her tears didn't move me. Not when I could see those lunch boxes scattered across our floor, each one labeled with my children's names like they were packages waiting to be shipped somewhere far away from everyone who actually loved them. The siren stopped right outside our house. The sound of car doors slamming outside our house felt like salvation. Heavy footsteps on our front porch, followed by that authoritative knock that only cops know how to do. Firm, confident, demanding immediate attention. Through the window, I could see at least 3 patrol cars lined up in our driveway, their red and blue lights still flashing, painting our quiet suburban street in colors that belonged in action movies, not real life. Police. Open up. I rushed to the door, my legs feeling like jelly underneath me. When I pulled it open, I was face to face with 2 officers, a tall guy with graying hair who looked like he'd seen everything twice, and a younger woman whose hand was resting casually on her radio. Behind them, I could see more cops getting out of their cars, and neighbors starting to peek out of their windows and gather on their porches. You the one who called? The older officer asked, his eyes already scanning past me to take in the scene inside our house. Yeah, that's me. Marcus Wheeler. My sister-in-law, she's... I gestured helplessly toward the living room where Clarice was still sitting on our couch, no longer crying, but staring straight ahead like she was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. She came here to babysit our kids, but she brought all this stuff. The female officer stepped past me, her eyes immediately locking onto the contents of the duffel bag scattered across our floor. Ma'am, I need you to stand up slowly and put your hands where I can see them. Clarice looked up like she was waking up from a dream. For a second, she seemed genuinely confused about where she was and why there were police officers in our living room. Then reality seemed to crash back over her. and she stood up with her hands raised, moving like she was underwater. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer continued, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You're under arrest." I watched them cuff Clarice right there in our foyer, the same spot where just 20 minutes ago she'd been hugging our kids and promising to take good care of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the fact that if I hadn't forgotten my wallet, if I hadn't gone back inside, if I hadn't gotten curious about that damn bag. Jesus Christ, the older officer muttered as his partner knelt down to examine the contents of the duffel bag. He picked up one of the prescription bottles, shaking it gently so the pills rattled inside. "This is premeditated as hell." The female officer was reading Clarice her rights in that flat, professional tone they probably practiced at the academy. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." But Clarice wasn't listening. She was staring at Riley, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs with tears streaming down her face. My wife looked like someone had just told her that everything she'd believed about her family, about her sister, had been a lie. "Riley," Clarice said quietly, interrupting the officer mid-sentence. "You have to understand, I never meant for it to happen like this." "Shut up," Riley said, her voice raw. "Just shut up, Clarice. I don't want to hear another word from you." More officers were arriving, including a detective in a cheap suit who immediately started taking photos of everything. The rope, the duct tape, those horrible little lunch boxes with our children's names on them. Each flash of his camera felt like a punch to the gut. "Sir, I'm going to need to get a statement from you," the older officer said, pulling out a notepad. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened here tonight?" I told him everything. About Clarice's phone call earlier in the week, about how strange it had seemed that she'd volunteered to babysit, about coming back for my wallet and finding the bag. The officer wrote everything down in neat handwriting, asking questions that made me think he'd dealt with this kind of thing before. "The suspect said something about Arizona?" he asked, looking up from his notes. "Yeah, she said she'd rented a place there. Said it was somewhere safe, with good schools." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. She had directions printed out and everything. The detective with the camera had moved on to photographing the fake IDs he'd found in the manila envelope. "These are pretty sophisticated," he said to his partner. "Professional quality. Someone spent some real money on these." That hit me like a freight train. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment breakdown. Clarice had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. She'd researched how to make fake documents. She'd scouted locations in Arizona. She'd studied our kids' routines and clothing sizes. This was a full-scale operation. "How long has she been planning this?" I asked the detective. He looked up from the evidence bags he was filling. "Based on what I'm seeing here, I'd say at least a couple months, maybe longer. The rental agreement is dated 3 weeks ago, but getting documents like this takes time. She's been watching your family, learning their habits." From upstairs came the sound of little voices. Mia, trying to comfort the twins, probably reading them a story or playing some kind of game to distract them from all the chaos downstairs. They didn't understand what was happening, didn't know how close they'd come to being stolen away from everything they knew and loved. "Your kids," the female officer said, following my gaze toward the stairs. "We're going to need to talk to them at some point. Nothing traumatic, just to make sure they're okay and see if they noticed anything unusual about their aunt's behavior." "They're fine," I said quickly. "She didn't hurt them. We caught this before." "Before what? Before she drugged them? Before she tied them up and threw them in the back of a car? Before she drove them across state lines to some rental house in the middle of nowhere?" The detective was examining one of the prescription bottles more closely. "We'll need to get these analyzed, but based on the size and color, I'm guessing these are some kind of sedative. Probably something strong enough to keep kids quiet for a long car ride." Clarice was sitting in the back of a patrol car now, visible through our front window. She wasn't crying anymore, wasn't fighting. She just sat there staring straight ahead, while neighbors gathered on the sidewalk to gawk at the spectacle our lives had become. "What happens now?" Riley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We book her, process the evidence, and build a case," the older officer said. "Based on what we've got here, the restraints, the drugs, the fake documents, the rental agreement. This is looking at kidnapping in the first degree, child endangerment, maybe federal charges depending on the jurisdiction of that Arizona property." I felt Riley's hand slip into mine, her fingers cold and trembling. 10 minutes ago, we'd been getting ready for our anniversary dinner. Now we were standing in our living room talking to police officers about how my sister-in-law had tried to steal our children. The detective stood up, sealing the last evidence bag. We'll need you both to come down to the station tomorrow to give formal statements. Tonight, just focus on your kids. This is going to be hard for them to understand. Through the window, I watched the patrol car pull away with Clarice in the back seat. Our street slowly began to return to normal, neighbors drifting back inside, porch lights flickering off. But nothing about our lives would ever be normal again. The phone call from Detective Morrison came 3 days later, while I was sitting at my kitchen table trying to pretend everything was normal. The kids were at school. We decided to send them back on Monday despite Riley's protest that maybe they should stay home a few more days. But I figured they needed routine, needed to feel like their world wasn't completely upside down, even though mine sure as hell was. Mr. Wheeler, we've been digging into your sister-in-law's activities over the past few months, and I think you need to hear what we found. I grabbed a pen and a napkin, suddenly feeling like I needed to write this down. Okay, I'm listening. First off, that rental property in Arizona. She didn't just find it last week. She signed a 6-month lease back in August, paid the entire thing up front. Cash. We're talking about $12,000, Marcus. August. That was 2 months ago. 2 months of planning, of watching us, of preparing to steal our children. Where the hell did she get 12 grand in cash? That's where it gets interesting. She liquidated her entire savings account on July 15th. Cleaned out her 401k too. Took the penalties and everything. We're talking about $43,000 total. I dropped my pen. $43,000. Clarice had spent her entire life savings on this insane plan. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. She also opened 3 different bank accounts under fake names, same names that are on those IDs we found. She's been funneling money into those accounts for weeks, setting up what looks like a completely new identity for herself and your kids. Riley walked into the kitchen right then, took one look at my face, and immediately sat down across from me. I put the phone on speaker so she could hear. Detective Morrison, this is Riley. What else did you find? Mrs. Wheeler, I'm going to be straight with you. Your sister didn't just wake up one day and decide to do this. She's been planning this operation for at least 4 months, maybe longer. She bought a 2019 Honda Pilot specifically for this, paid cash, registered it under one of her fake names. We found it parked 2 blocks from your house. For months, while we'd been living our lives, working, raising our kids, worrying about normal things like homework and soccer practice, and whether we could afford to fix the dishwasher, Clarice had been plotting to tear our family apart. The house in Arizona, Riley said, her voice barely steady. What's it like? There was a pause, and It's isolated. About 40 miles outside of Phoenix, surrounded by desert. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. She had it set up like a family home. Kids' toys, clothes in their sizes, even had their favorite cereals in the pantry. My stomach turned over. How did she know their favorite cereals? That's what we're trying to figure out. We think she's been watching your family for months. We found a journal in her apartment with detailed notes about your kids' routines, their likes and dislikes, their school schedules. She knew what time Mia's piano lessons were. She knew which playground the twins liked best. She even knew that Ezra won't eat anything green. Riley made a small, choked sound. She's been stalking us. Essentially, yes. We also found receipts for a high-powered camera with a telephoto lens, purchased 6 months ago. And here's the really disturbing part. She had photos. Hundreds of them. Your kids at school, at the park, playing in your backyard. Some of them were taken from inside your house. Inside our house. I felt like I was going to be sick. How? We're still investigating that. But we think she had access at some point. Maybe when you weren't home, or during one of the few times she did visit. The photos show intimate details, the kids' bedrooms, their toys, even what was in your refrigerator. I thought back to the handful of times Clarice had been in our house over the past year. Riley's birthday dinner in March. Christmas morning. That one Sunday in June when she'd stopped by unexpectedly and stayed for maybe an hour. Had she been taking pictures the whole time? Memorizing the layout of our home? Learning where our kids slept? There's more. Detective Morrison continued. We contacted the Arizona authorities, and they searched the rental property. She had it set up like your kids already lived there. 3 bedrooms decorated according to their ages and interests. Mia's room had astronomy posters, just like her room at your house. The twins' room had dinosaur everything. She even had the same brand of nightlight that Jonah uses. Riley was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She knew everything about them. She also had homeschool materials, medical records she'd somehow obtained or forged, and what appears to be a complete plan for integrating them into a new community. She'd researched local activities, found a pediatrician, even looked into youth sports leagues. The level of detail was staggering. This wasn't some desperate, last-minute decision. This was a complete life plan. Clarice had been building a new reality for our children, a reality where we didn't exist. What about her work? I asked. How was she managing all this while holding down a job? That's another red flag. She quit her job at the accounting firm 3 months ago, told them she was moving to care for a sick relative. Her coworkers said she'd been acting strange for weeks before that, distracted, making mistakes, talking about family obligations that didn't make sense. Riley's brother Kevin called that afternoon, after word had gotten around the extended family. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Clarice has been obsessed with your kids for years. I should have said something sooner." "What do you mean, obsessed?" "She talks about them constantly. How she could raise them better. How they don't know her well enough. How you and Riley are too protective. Last Christmas, she spent the entire family dinner complaining about how she never gets alone time with them. I thought it was just typical aunt jealousy, you know? I never imagined she'd." "Kevin, did she ever say anything specific? About taking them or wanting more time with them?" There was a long pause. Yeah, she did. About 6 months ago, she said something about how kids need to know all their family, not just their parents. She said sometimes parents don't know what's best, and other family members have to step in. I told her that was crazy talk, but she just got this look in her eyes, like she was already planning something. After we hung up, Riley and I sat in silence for a long time. Our house felt different now, violated. Knowing that Clarice had been watching us, photographing us, documenting our children's lives like some kind of predator made every room feel unsafe. "How do we explain this to the kids?" Riley finally asked. I didn't have an answer. How do you tell a 9-year-old that her aunt spent months planning to steal her? How do you explain to 5-year-olds that someone they trusted wanted to take them away from everything they knew and loved? The detective called back that evening with one final piece of information that made everything even worse. "We found plane tickets," he said. "One-way tickets to Mexico, purchased for next Wednesday. For passengers, 1 adult and 3 children, all under the fake names. She wasn't planning to stay in Arizona. That was just a staging area. Mexico. Once she got our kids across that border, we might never have seen them again." The courthouse smelled like old wood and stale coffee, the kind of place where serious business happened every day, but somehow always felt stuck in 1975. Riley and I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, our hands clasped together so tightly my fingers were going numb. This was it. 8 months after that nightmare Saturday night, we were finally going to see Clarice face consequences for what she'd tried to do to our family. She looked different in her orange jumpsuit. Smaller somehow, like prison had shrunk her down to size. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she'd lost weight. Not in a healthy way, but in that hollow-cheeked way that made her look older than her 34 years. When they brought her into the courtroom, she glanced our way for maybe half a second before staring straight ahead at the judge's bench. Her lawyer was this young guy in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Public defender, probably, stuck with a case that was impossible to win. The evidence against Clarice was overwhelming. The photos, the fake IDs, the rental property, the plane tickets to Mexico. But he had to try something, right? "Your Honor," he said during his opening statement, "my client is a woman who felt isolated from her own family, desperate to connect with her niece and nephews. Yes, she made terrible decisions. Yes, she broke the law. But this was never about hurting these children. This was about a lonely woman who felt excluded from the lives of people she loved." I wanted to stand up and scream. Lonely? She'd spent $43,000 and 6 months planning to steal our kids. That wasn't loneliness. That was calculated predation. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Janet Stevens, wasn't buying the sympathy angle either. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant didn't just make a mistake. She didn't have a momentary lapse in judgment. She systematically planned to abduct 3 children, drug them into compliance, and transport them across state and international borders. She purchased restraints, sedatives, and forged identity documents. She stalked this family for months, photographing their children without consent, learning their routines and vulnerabilities. When Detective Morrison took the stand, he laid out the evidence piece by piece. The timeline of Clarice's preparations, the photos she'd taken of our kids, the detailed journal where she'd documented their likes, dislikes, and daily routines. The rental house in Arizona, set up like some twisted dollhouse version of our real home. The defendant had planned every detail, Morrison testified. She knew which cereals the children preferred, which toys they liked to sleep with, even which child was afraid of the dark. This level of preparation indicates months of surveillance and planning. But it was when they called Clarice to the stand that things got really ugly. Her lawyer had probably told her to show remorse, to play up the lonely aunt angle. Instead, she came across as cold and calculating, like she still thought she'd been in the right. "I just wanted them to know me," she said when the prosecutor pressed her about the fake documents. "Their parents kept them from me. I barely saw them twice a year. How was I supposed to build a relationship with children I never got to spend time with?" "So you decided to kidnap them?" "I decided to give them an opportunity to see who I really was. Away from all the interference." Stevens leaned forward. "Miss Cooper, you purchased sedatives strong enough to incapacitate small children. You bought rope and duct tape. You planned to drive them to another state without their parents' knowledge or consent. How is that giving them an opportunity?" For the first time, Clarice's composure cracked slightly. "They would have been safe with me. I would never have hurt them. I had everything planned out. Good schools, nice neighborhood, activities they would have enjoyed." "In Mexico?" A long pause. "Eventually, yes. Where their parents would never have found them." Another pause. "Where they could have grown up knowing their family." The jury looked horrified. Even her own lawyer was shaking his head slightly, probably realizing his client was digging her own grave with every word. When the judge sentenced her to 12 years with the possibility of parole in 6, Clarice didn't cry or protest or show any emotion at all. She just nodded once, like she was accepting a dinner reservation, and let the bailiff lead her away. Riley and I walked out of that courthouse feeling like we could finally breathe again. The hardest conversation of my life happened on a Tuesday evening in November, 3 weeks after the trial ended. We'd been putting it off, hoping maybe the kids were too young to really understand what had happened, hoping we could just move forward without having to explain the ugly truth. But Mia was asking too many questions, and the twins were having nightmares they couldn't explain. It was time. We waited until after dinner, after homework was done and the dishes were put away. Riley made hot chocolate, the good kind with real marshmallows that we usually save for special occasions. I guess this qualified, in the worst possible way. "Kids, come sit with us in the living room," Riley called out. "We need to talk about something important." Mia appeared first, that serious expression on her face that meant she already knew this wasn't going to be a fun conversation. The twins came tumbling down the stairs, chocolate mustaches from their after-dinner cookies still visible on their upper lips. They piled onto the couch between Riley and me, warm little bodies that smelled like shampoo and childhood. "Remember the night when Aunt Clarice came to babysit?" I started, my voice already feeling thick. "And how the police came to our house?" Jonah nodded solemnly. "There were lots of cars with pretty lights." "That's right, buddy. Well, we found out that Aunt Clarice had made some very bad choices. She had brought things with her that night that scared Mommy and Daddy." "What kind of things?" Mia asked, leaning forward. "She was too smart, my daughter. Always needed to know the details. Always wanted to understand the why behind everything." Riley took over, her voice gentle but steady. "She brought things that she was planning to use to take you away from us. Without asking, without telling us where you were going." The room got very quiet. Even the twins stopped fidgeting. "Take us where?" Ezra whispered. "Far away," I said. "To a place where we wouldn't have been able to find you." Mia's eyes went wide. She was going to steal us? There it was. The word we'd been dancing around for weeks. Steal. Like our children were objects that could be taken and hidden away. "Yes, sweetheart. She was going to steal you." What happened next broke my heart into a million pieces. Mia started crying. Not the dramatic, loud crying of a hurt or angry child, but quiet, scared tears that rolled down her cheeks as she processed what we'd just told her. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "She had the same shampoo I use. It was in her bag, but she said she brought it for activities. Why would activities need my shampoo? Jesus." Even at 9 years old, Mia had picked up on details that the adults had missed until it was almost too late. Jonah crawled into Riley's lap, his little face scrunched up with confusion. "But why? Why did she want to take us?" "Sometimes grown-ups make very wrong choices when they're sad or angry," Riley explained, stroking his hair. "Aunt Clarice felt left out of our family, and instead of talking to us about it, she decided to do something that would have hurt all of us very badly." "Are we safe now?" Ezra asked, his voice so small I had to lean down to hear him. "Yes," I said firmly. "You are completely safe. Aunt Clarice is in jail, which means she can't come near you or our house. And Mommy and Daddy will always, always protect you." But even as I said the words, I could see the fear in their eyes. That basic trust that children have, the belief that the adults in their lives will keep them safe, had been shaken. Clarice hadn't just tried to steal their bodies. She'd stolen their innocence too. For weeks after that conversation, none of them wanted to be alone. Mia started sleeping in our bed again, something she hadn't done since she was 5. The twins refused to play in the backyard unless one of us was sitting right there watching them. When the doorbell rang, all 3 of them would freeze and look at us with wide, scared eyes. Riley cried in the shower every night for a week after we told them. I could hear her through the bathroom door, these quiet, heartbroken sobs that she tried to muffle with the sound of running water. But I heard them anyway, and they cut through me like knives. The first letter arrived on a Thursday in January, 6 months after Clarice had been sentenced. I was sorting through the mail when I saw her name in the return address, Clarice Cooper, followed by a number that meant nothing to me, but everything to the State Corrections Department. My hand started shaking just looking at her handwriting, that neat cursive I'd seen on Christmas cards and birthday notes back when she was just Riley's weird sister instead of the woman who tried to steal our children. I almost threw it away without opening it. Should have thrown it away. But some morbid curiosity made me tear open the envelope while standing right there at the kitchen counter. "Dear Marcus and Riley," it began, and I could practically hear her voice reading the words. "I hope you're doing well and that the children are happy and healthy. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I want you to understand that I never meant to hurt anyone. Never meant to hurt anyone. The woman had bought rope and sedatives and fake IDs, but she never meant to hurt anyone. I know you think I'm some kind of monster," the letter continued, "but I was just a woman who felt invisible in her own family. Every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering, I watched from the sidelines while you two got to be the stars of those children's lives. I just wanted to matter to someone. I just wanted to be important." I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. But that night, after Riley had gone to bed, I fished it out and read the rest. "You made me feel like an outsider in my own sister's life. You never invited me to school events or soccer games or dance recitals. You kept me at arm's length and then acted surprised when I felt excluded. I didn't have a choice. You left me no choice. That was it for me. No choice. She'd had 1,000 choices. She could have talked to us. She could have asked to spend more time with the kids. She could have shown up to the events she claimed we never invited her to. Except we had invited her, and she'd always had something better to do." The second letter came 3 weeks later. This one I opened immediately, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "I dream about the children every night," this one said. "I wonder if Mia is still interested in astronomy, if the twins are doing well in school. I had such wonderful plans for them. I could have given them experiences you never could have afforded." I stopped reading letters after that. When they arrived, and they kept arriving, once or twice a month, I threw them straight in the garbage. Riley never asked what was in them, and I never told her. But the damage was spreading beyond just our immediate family. Some of Riley's relatives started taking sides, saying we were overreacting, that Clarice was just lonely and made a mistake. She didn't actually go through with it, Riley's cousin Sarah said at Easter dinner. "Maybe you should consider visiting her. She is family, after all." Family. The word had lost all meaning for me. Family didn't drug children. Family didn't plan to steal kids and disappear across international borders. Family didn't spend months stalking and photographing children without their parents' knowledge. We stopped going to big family gatherings after that. Changed our phone numbers. Installed a security system with cameras and motion sensors. We'd learned that sharing DNA with someone didn't make them trustworthy, and we weren't taking any more chances. 2 years later, October 15th doesn't look the same anymore. We don't get dressed up for fancy dinners or make reservations at romantic restaurants. Instead, we've created something better, something that includes the people who matter most. This year, like last year, we celebrated our anniversary with a family movie day. Mia picked the movie, some animated thing about space explorers that she'd been wanting to see for months. The twins got to choose the snacks, which meant way too much popcorn and those gummy bears that turn their tongues weird colors. Riley made her famous chocolate chip cookies, the kind with the slightly burnt edges that somehow taste better than the perfect ones. We built a fort in the living room using every blanket and pillow in the house. Jonah and Ezra turned it into some kind of spaceship command center, complete with sound effects and complicated rules that only 5-year-olds could understand. Mia curled up between Riley and me, her head on my shoulder, pointing out all the scientific inaccuracies in the movie like she always does. "Dad, that's not how gravity works in space," she said during one particularly dramatic scene. "Tell the movie makers," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Maybe they'll listen to you. This is what happiness looks like now. Not candlelit dinners or expensive wine, but my son's laugh when his brother does something silly. My daughter's concentration when she's explaining something she learned in school. My wife's smile when she thinks no one is looking, content and safe in our own living room. We are whole. We are safe. And that's everything." Clarice will be eligible for parole in 4 more years. The letters stopped coming about 6 months ago. Maybe she finally got the message, or maybe the prison started blocking them. Either way, I don't care. She made her choice that night when she showed up at our door with rope and sedatives and fake documents. People still ask sometimes if we've forgiven her. Usually it's well-meaning relatives or friends who think forgiveness is supposed to be automatic, like flipping a switch. "She's still family," they say. "Don't you think the kids should know their aunt?" But they don't understand. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust isn't something you can just decide to give back to someone who tried to steal your children. Maybe someday, when the kids are grown and can make their own decisions about who they want in their lives. Maybe then. For now, we choose safety. We choose each other. We choose the family we've built together, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, movie night by movie night. And that choice has made all the difference.